talk about preference falsification in this video, and it's something I've mentioned here and there in other videos, and it's an important concept to understand. The term comes from an economist who last when I checked, he was teaching at Duke, named Timur Kuran, and he published this back in the 1990s, so it's about a quarter of a century old. And preference falsification involves people saying something other than what they truly think. And they say these things, despite the fact they don't really believe them, because of societal pressures. Now, these can be mild societal pressures, a desire to be in conformity with what other people are thinking and where you work or in your neighborhood. It can be something more serious. You could be living in a totalitarian state where if you say the wrong thing, you could be arrested. Maybe you'd be imprisoned. Maybe you could be executed. So people feeling these pressures just watch very carefully what they say. Now, if you want to look at it, shot two. Now, if you want to look at this from a more simple level, think of the old fairy tale, the Emperor's New Clothes, where the Emperor is led to believe he's been conned, that he has this beautiful suit of clothes. And he's been told that only morons or people who are untrustworthy or treasonous can't see just how beautiful these clothes are. The reality is he's stark naked. And he prances around thinking he's got these wonderful clothes on. And of course, everybody applauds and comments how wonderful his outfit is. Until finally, a little boy, and there was different variants of this, but in one of them, the little boy says, he's naked. And then the whole thing collapses because everybody knew he was naked all along, but they were afraid to say it. And here's this little boy saying it. Well, how can, this whole lie suddenly comes apart. Pause. All right. Shot two, resume. Now, this preference falsification is a problem because it kills honest political discourse. Because people won't say what they really think, so that you can't have an honest conversation. You don't really know. You can be misled, if you're a political leader, into thinking that what you're saying is resonating with people, when in fact it isn't. It might even be the opposite effect is coming from the people. But you're not aware of that. And this in turn creates volatile political situations, which can lead to sudden shifts that seem to come out of the blue, even to the point of having a revolution. Let me give you a simple example. I mean, anybody who knows anything about what's going on K-12 these days knows what's happening in the schools. They're becoming increasingly politically correct. And this coming fall, you're going to have teachers are going to be pressured to support Black Lives Matter, call for name changes at their school, changes in curriculum. All these pressures are being brought on teachers. Now, do all these teachers buy into this? I'm sure many do, maybe even most do. But I know at the personal level that there are many that do not. They don't buy this. And it's not their personal view. They do preference falsify. They say, yes, I agree with this, or maybe they just keep their mouth shut. And I know teachers like this. I know several of them. I know many of them. In the meantime, what are they doing? They're sending their kids to private school, or maybe they're homeschooling them, and they're stocking up on guns. So, in their public life, they appear to be doing one thing. Privately, they believe something different, and they're doing something different. And this causes, a lot of political volatility. Now, if we believe what we're seeing in the press, if we believe what progressive Democrats are telling us, we have to believe that in the wake of the murder of George Floyd several months ago, back in May, suddenly tens of millions, hundreds of millions of people in this country, just in the last 60 days, have come to the conclusion that this country is a racist cesspit filled with institutional racism, structural racism, systemic racism, invisible racism, what I call ISSI racism, ISSI. And they buy all this. They suddenly support Black Lives Matter. They support Antifa. They support the idea of looting and arson and rioting. That's what we're being told day in and day out. That all these people, within 60 days, have suddenly done a 180 in their minds. And the things that they're signing on to, that they're saying they accept or that they believe in, are true. Do you really believe that? Do you really believe that American corporations, just again, in the last 60 days, have suddenly changed their mind about Black Lives Matter? Or do you think it's just hoping maybe if they come out and they say that and they give a little money, maybe their stores won't get looted, or they won't be protested against, or their headquarters won't be picketed and have its windows smashed and get looted? Is this some sort of vast scheme for protection? They're paying people off. I mean, if you look at all these things that are going on in the country, and you look at this seemingly overwhelming support for tearing down statues, for tearing down the history of this country. Let's go blow up Mount Rushmore. Let's tear down statues of Grant. Let's deface statues of Mahatma Gandhi because he's a racist. Let's get rid of all the Columbus statues. If you really believe that, hundreds of millions of Americans believe these things and have simply just in the last 60 days changed their minds about all this. I mean, you have somebody who's 60 years old and suddenly he's pro BLM. Suddenly he's pro this and pro that and against this and against that. But in 60 years, you don't just change your mind overnight. I mean, I'm not saying you can't change your mind, but changing your mind. I used to be a liberal Democrat. I voted for George McGovern in 1972. I've been moving steadily rightward ever since. But it's not like one day I woke up and I was a Trump supporter. I mean, it was a long evolution of the, I'm not going to go into here, but where I am today represents 40 years, 47 years of personal evolution, changes of attitudes. It didn't happen like that. But that's what we're being told has happened in this country in the last 60 days. People have suddenly done these 180s. And if you believe this, you're a fool. Because what's happening is preference falsification. People, corporations are afraid to say they're against Black Lives Matter. Because if you do, you're going to get called a racist. They're afraid to say they're against looting and arson and rioting. Because if they do, they'll be called racists. But you can bring pressures to bear on people, and they'll say the things you want them to say, but that doesn't mean you've changed their mind. You're creating the environment of the emperor wearing no clothes. You're creating a situation of volatile preference falsification. If that's true, if I'm right, and I believe that I am, the next question then is, what brings this to a halt? What event is going to be the equivalent of the little boys saying, the emperor is naked. And then this whole edifice, this whole construct brought about by pressures that lead to preference falsification comes crashing down. Now, I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know if it's something that's going to happen soon or even before the 2020 election. But at some point, it's going to happen. I think as a country, we'll be better off if it happens before the election than after. Because if Donald Trump loses and Joe Biden and the Democrats win, and then something happens that's going to bring this edifice down, there's going to be hell to pay in this country. And you may have a revolution, or as I've been warning for more than 10 years now, we may approach the abyss, or as I've warned for the last 3 years, we may plunge into civil war. And that's my big fear. But don't be fooled by what you see. It looks like there's this irresistible momentum. It's not irresistible momentum. It's fear that you're seeing. It's the fear that you saw in revolutionary Paris when the terror began. Suddenly people said what they were supposed to say, even though they didn't believe it. Because if they didn't, they might end up laid out on the guillotine. Or look at Bolshevik Russia. I mean, they maintained this set of lies right up to about 1990, when it started to implode. People started realizing that there was preference falsification. And I think that's where we're at today in this country. And at the minimum, it's creating an impossibility of having meaningful political discourse. Because you're dealing with people who say they believe one thing, but they actually believe something entirely different. So you don't know what the polls are saying. I mean, if the teachers who are afraid to say, I don't buy this BLM stuff, are probably also afraid to tell somebody publicly or a pollster that, maybe they're going to vote for Trump. That's, that's, I've talked about it before, the Bradley effect too. That's preference falsification. As you drive up this fear of being called a racist in this country, and nobody likes being called a racist, unless maybe you belong to the Klan, but you're talking very, very, very tiny percentage of the population. You can get people to shut up, to avoid doing anything that might lead somebody, well, you don't like BLM, it's because you're a racist. You have white privilege. And you can do that. You can create that environment, but you're not really changing people's minds. And what I don't understand is how people in this country can believe that, more than 100 million minds have been changed in 60 days just because of the death of one person. I don't buy that at all. That's not the way the human mind works. It's not the way public opinion is shaped and changed. I mean, you can change people's minds with one event like Pearl Harbor. That'll bring people around, but this isn't the equivalent of Pearl Harbor. Even if you look at how 9/11 changed American minds, remember we were all united and unified and all. How long did that last? I mean, how long did Remember Pearl Harbor last? I've had students, I've been teaching undergraduates for almost 30 years now. And some of them don't know what Pearl Harbor is or was. They don't remember Pearl Harbor. Kids today, I teach a course in the U.S. and the Middle East. The undergraduates I get today have no memory of 9/11. They don't understand. They don't really know. So that's the situation we're in. Preference falsification on a mass hysterical scale. Discourse is dead. Political discourse is dead in this country. And the question is, what is going to happen? What event will cause people to suddenly back off and say, well, I'm sorry, I just don't buy this anymore? Because it's going to happen. It's just a question of when. Anyway, if you like this video, please leave a comment, give me a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, and hit the notification button so you know when I post new videos. And until the next time, I am out of here.